All right, what's good, everyone? On today's show, I went through last year's splits through game logs. I put on the Poindexter glasses. I had a model, as the Warriors say, they love the models and the analytical minds. I did it today, looking for a correlation between lineups and wins. I'm posing this question to you all. Who is the Crunch Time 5? The lineup that is in there when the game is on the line. On today's Locked On Dubs. Bang!
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we went with the audacious bang right out of the gate, and I'm back to life. Charlie Walter with you from 95.7 The Game, formerly 95.7 The Game, and KPIX in San Francisco, covered the Warriors there. This is Locked On Warriors. It's a free ticket. We're available on YouTube. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and you can take us on the go wherever you get your audio podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Matt Kolsky joins me today. He was a co-host of mine at 95.7 The Game, now worked at KNBR. Kolsky, we got a good topic on today's show, man. You gave me about 15 minutes to wait for you after my Bengals went down in heartbreaking fashion, so I had some time to really dig through the weeds.
I'm glad. Anything to take your mind off of the misery of being a Bengals fan.
Yeah, not only that, it was my FanDuel read yesterday, so I gave the people a tough one there. But
I seem to remember someone cautioning the good folks, against putting their money on the Bengals as a heavy favorite.
Yeah, the everydayers know that, but I thought, it's Cincy, they'll get it done. No. Anyways, I went through the lineups, man. I literally went through every single game log that I could in about 15 minutes and try to find a correlation. So the Dubs last year, they started 5-1 with the lineup of Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, and Looney. So technically, swap Clay for Pods. You could run back that same problem, that same lineup problem. That lineup was tinkered with pretty quick because Draymond would get suspended, right?
Right.
Yep. He gets suspended. They break up that group. It was a 10-13 record at that point. Green and Wiggins replaced by Kaminga and Pods. That lineup wins some, they lose some, still a below 500 team. That changes when Draymond returns from the suspension. The Dubs started winning, and they were winning at a good clip. It was this lineup. A core four of Curry, Kaminga, Draymond, and Wiggins. Pajemski and Clay were going back and forth for that fifth spot. But there you have it. This year's lineup. Curry, Pods, Wiggins, Kaminga, Draymond. The numbers don't lie, except that lineup would cool off slightly. The Warriors would win 10 of their final 12 games with this lineup. Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, and Trace Jackson Davis. So, between Trace, Wiggins, and Kaminga, which of those two are in Crunch Time 5? Who's on the bench at that point, And it's usually the starting lineup is the finishing lineup, right?
Well, historically, not always with the Warriors. I'll say this first off, and I've said this or some version of this many times before. I cannot imagine how the best version of the Warriors does not feature Jonathan Kaminga in the starting and finishing lineup, to be honest. To me, the true non-negotiables for those lineups should really be Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Jonathan Kaminga. And I know this runs counter to everything Steve Kerr believes, but not even just necessarily because I believe he's earned it. I do believe he's earned it. I can understand an argument that he hasn't. Okay. But I do believe that the best possible version of this team, whether it has Kaminga on it or not, the best possible version of this team, it features Jonathan Kaminga coming out of the gates hot. And he has every reason to do so with the contract situation and with the Warriors situation And they have every reason to, at the very least, give him that opportunity. So those three to me are the non-negotiable starter finishers. Let's just say for the sake of argument, it's more or less the same thing, even though, you know, in the Iguodala days, certainly that wasn't always the case, right? But there's no Andre Iguodala on this team. So if Steph, Draymond, and Kaminga for me are the absolutes, I think we can reasonably guess that Podziemski is in there based on, again, how they valued him in the offseason. The question becomes, do you want to subject Draymond Green to the rigors of playing center in the Western Conference in 2024 for what you hope will be 82 games? And if you're willing to take that on, then I think probably your best way to give it a go at the beginning is with all due respect and assuring you that I'm not making the comparison it sounds like I'm making, your version of the death lineup, which is Draymond at center, Kaminga at the 4, Wiggins at the 3, Podziemski and Curry at the guards. Can that lineup hold up defensively in the Western Conference? I truly don't know. Does Draymond at his current age have it in his body to do that all season long? I don't know. But there's
no Kevin Durant. We can't reinvent the death lineup. We have to be progressive. We have to be forward thinking, Kolsky. But okay. I see what you're saying though. The way that it's constructed, that I like that lineup probably best. But I do like Trace in there.
Now, I think if we use history, right, it's fair to assume that lineup will be saved for, you know, in the early parts of the regular season, maybe kind of a break glass in emergency lineup, and maybe used a little more as the year goes on and potentially in the playoffs in a pinch. So I do think we are likely to see, certainly in the starting lineup, if not in the finishing lineup, either Looney or Trace, just as a defensive presence and in theory a finisher at the basket. Although, you know, Looney hasn't always been a great finisher at the basket. I mean, he's not bad for his size and position, but that's not a strength of his necessarily. So if this Looney shooting threes thing is real, it kind of changes the equation, right? I think if Kevon Looney comes out and, you know, I don't want to put weight
stretches
on
the floor,
right?
Just stretches the floor, just as a threat.
Well, I'm just saying, like, let's say in the preseason, for the sake of argument, right? As if it matters. He hits, you know, he takes 15 threes and hits 8 of them, right? And you're like, oh my God. Like,
where was this?
That's more than 50%.
They saw it at UCLA.
You know, I'm saying an overwhelming shooting result from Kevon Looney in the preseason, right? Where he just looks fluid and he's nailing them from out there, right? All of a sudden, I'm saying, well, I don't even really care if it's Podziemski or Wiggins on the bench, right? I can play it might depend on who we're playing against. I can play a huge lineup where it's Steph, Wiggins, Kaminga, Draymond, Looney shooting threes and playing defense, right? I can play a smaller lineup where it's Steph, Podziemski, Kaminga, Draymond, Looney. And if I want to go really small, then I put Looney on the bench and play the aforementioned depth lineup. That gives me so much optionality. And then, especially if we, I think, safely assume that Kyle Anderson is not going to have a resurgence as a jump shooter, like that's another guy that, as of now, can't be on the court that much with Looney or Draymond, who also can't spend too much time on the court with each other if none of those guys are shooting threes. So, you know, early returns from 3-point land on Draymond or Looney would or Anderson, I mean, why not throw him in there? If any of those guys suddenly, surprisingly, come out shooting threes really well, it's going to really change what this team can do lineup-wise.
We're talking lineups moving forward on this show. We're also talking Trace Jackson Davis, where he's going to fit into some of the lineups. I went through his splits, man. Really impressed with what he did when he started getting the minutes. We're talking about that coming up. Let's tell you about one of our sponsors, Gametime. Download the Gametime app today because there is good stuff to be had. It makes life a little bit easier, Kolsky. You go to a football game, basketball game, baseball game, a concert, whatever it may be. You're running a little bit behind. You haven't bought your tickets yet. And the Gametime app just comes in clutch. You get panoramic views from the seat that you want to buy in the app before you buy them. So you're not sitting behind one of those poles. You get the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And the closer you get to Gametime, the cheaper the ticket gets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Back to it. All right, Trace Jackson Davis, Kolsky. Splits. One of my favorite things to do is hop on the old basketball reference page and go down the rabbit hole. By the way, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers have seen this. Have you seen like the Instagram page that does the 100, 50, 25, 10? You know what I'm talking about? 100% of 90s NBA fans can name this player, you know, and
No, I have not seen this.
Okay. Well, it's good
You're
stuff.
going to have to send it to me.
Yeah, it's good stuff for sure. And everyone out there to check it out. Trace Jackson Davis. That's a rabbit hole right there. Went down this one. Once he played, I mean, look at it this way. The two games that he got between 30 and 39 minutes, 13 points, 11 rebounds, a defensive rating of 97, a plus minus of 12.6, shot at 61% from the floor. I mean, that's impressive stuff right there. But I was going deeper into it. In the months of March and April, the last 2 months of the year, through 23 games, when he got more than 20 minutes for the first time throughout a month, averaged 11 points and 7 rebounds during those months, had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Steals-wise, it didn't do much steals-wise, but had 39 blocks over the course of 23 games. Trace Jackson Davis, man. What's his ceiling?
It's a good one. Man, you know, I don't want to overstate his ceiling, but I don't want to understate it either. It's hard for me to imagine an all-star 5 who's short and doesn't shoot. You know? He gets so vertical, though, that he erases some of the, you know, height deficit that he's at against a lot of Western Conference centers.
And he's smart.
He's smart. We certainly look. You just gave the defensive rating. It was good. Again, it's hard for me to see him becoming an all-star, but I did not expect the rookie year that you just described, where really once he started getting more than 20 minutes a game, he became. Look, is he kind of? Again, I don't want to damn anyone with faint praise, but I think maybe Trace's ceiling is kind of like athletic Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney with alley-oops, which honestly is a significantly better player. If he reaches Kevon Looney's defensive level and maintains the ability to finish above the rim, which just Looney's never had because of his hips, yeah, that's a guy. Is he an all-star? Maybe not, but he's a starter. He's a legitimate starter. But he's going to have to consistently play above his size defensively. That's for sure.
The numbers I just read to you, though, man. I mean, that's good.
It's encouraging.
Stuff.
That's really good stuff.
And the guy
what do you
plays.
Think his ceiling is.
I'll tell you what. He's a future Hall of Famer if they play every game on Monday. Played 8 games on Monday.
See, okay.
Now
I know you 19, really went down a rabbit hole.
A plus minus of 19. Yeah.
On Mondays, you sound like a baseball statistician now.
Jeez. All right. Buddy Hield, man, as we start to go through these rotations, because we've kind of talked about the Crunchtime 5 and what the Warriors have in that regard, but just some of the different lineups that they're going to have to tinker. Can Buddy Hield and Steph to you play on the floor at the same time consistently? Is it something you experiment with to start and camp and go from there? What's your take on that?
I think you definitely hope they can. I mean, listen, we just sort of played out, right? There's a top 6 here that I think is. Let's put it this way. If everyone on this team is available and playing to the back of their basketball card, right? Which is to say, Andrew Wiggins maybe it's not 2022 Andrew Wiggins, but it's like Andrew Wiggins during the season, that season, and not the playoff like crazy one. There's a top 6. I know there's variables with Kaminga and Wiggins, but let's assume that goes like reasonably well to plan. Okay. Barring or before a trade. That top 6 is going to be hard to crack. And none of them strikes you as the 6th man type, but one of them is going to end up coming off the bench. Fair?
Fair.
Okay. In this world, the 7th man kind of becomes the 6th man. And I think that there's a legitimate competition there between the 3 new guys. And maybe Gary Payton.
It's probably situational at that point, with how different the 3 guys are you're mentioning. I mean, at that point, you're getting deep into the basketball mind of situation. You bring in a different guy, different spot. Maybe I don't know many situations where Buddy's going to be in there unless it's
I do, because here's why. DeAnthony Melton is probably the favorite to be the top choice there. Okay, let's say that first. He plays defense, which is going to be important for a guard playing a lot of minutes next to Steph Curry, or even next to Brandon Pajemski. Like you're going to want a player who can defend the position there. Right now, that starting lineup we just described features Steph Curry, one of the greatest shooters and scorers of all time. Fair enough. Brandon Pajemski, a guy coming off a good rookie year, but who we don't really know can score at volume or not. Either Wiggins or Kaminga, let's say, both of whom are, last we saw them, inconsistent scorers at best. Fair. Draymond Green, who inconsistent would be a favorable description of his scoring ability. And Kevon Looney, who that's not part of his game. Or Trace Jackson Davis, who scored reasonably well, as you described, for a rookie when he played, mostly on dunks. Probably going to be harder for him this year. That's not much in the scoring department. Who's the second best scorer on this team? And is it potentially Buddy Hield? And if so, that is going to buy him a lot of minutes. They're going to need his point production. And I'm not saying he's going to be the second leading scorer on this team. I certainly hope that's Kaminga. But if we're talking about the most reliable, put it in the bucket guys on this team at any given moment, Buddy Hield is in the conversation for number 2 with Kaminga and Wiggins. And I do think that's going to buy him early on a significant amount of minutes. You got to score to win in the NBA these days. You're not going to be able to beat the Denvers and the Phoenixes purely by Brandon Pajemski being scrappy and, getting lucky with the Kaminga or Wiggins explosions. I just think Hield's going to be important. I really do. And look, they'll look for some contribution offensively scoring from Melton and some from Anderson. But of those guys, and really of all the bench guys, barring the unknown and Moses Moody, Hield is the scorer, right? Who else is there?
That's what we're debating. Coming up on Locked On Warriors. All right. Hey, NFL fans. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you're thinking there's a trend going on, whatever it may be, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and you can do all this on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And because I'm a transparent handicapper, I gave you Cincinnati Buffalo parlay. Buffalo does their job and more. Cincinnati, no. It happens. But that's why you bet 5 and you get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so I want to continue this conversation on the scoring production that the Warriors are going to get and talk Buddy Hield, because he is kind of an untalked about, at least on this show the last few weeks, he's been an untalked about member of this team. And he's got a legitimate case for being, on the Mount Rushmore of greatest shooters this millennium. I mean, is that
certainly in college? And listen, statistically speaking, a
yes,
very, very good shooter in the NBA as well.
Outside of Steph, only 12 times in history where a player's averaged 40% from 3 on at least 8 3-point attempts per game for a whole season. Buddy's done it over the last 6 seasons. Biggest problem surrounding Hield, however, is that aside from the shooting aspect of his game, and that extends to the mid-range as well, and jump shots in general, he doesn't really do a ton to help you win at that point. Defensively, I don't know. Like, how many ceilings has Buddy raised at this point to where a team is significantly better because Buddy Hield's on the team? So that's what scares me a little bit if we're talking he's a serious option in crunch time. But again, I've been called a Buddy Hield hater before, and I'll proudly accept it, as will Indiana fans, as will Kings fans, and as will Sixers fans for the most part. I mean,
hater, I don't think people have strong negative feelings about Buddy Hield as much as they just either don't have strong feelings at all, or feel mildly disappointed. He has never been spectacular, and I think sometimes when guys are spectacular in college and then they're never spectacular in the pros, we get disappointed. But Buddy Hield is, as you pointed out with the 3-point shooting, put together a pretty damn good career as a shooter and scorer. And he has, let's see here, I don't know, averaged more than 15 points overall for his career and most of the seasons of his career. 1, 2, 3 seasons where he averaged 18 plus points. And those scoring numbers largely correspond to minutes, right? His shooting from 3 has been about as good as anyone ever who shoots that volume other than Steph Curry.
I think part of the hater take too, though, Kolsky, is that when you're on a team that's not winning and you're the microwave for the Kings, who weren't making the playoffs any of those seasons, that's where some of that comes into play.
Yeah, but that's not his fault, because as we pointed out, he's not.
It's not, but he does have. Yeah, he's not the guy that changes your ceiling, right? But
no, but is he a guy that could elevate the 7th spot on your roster with some much needed scoring? I think so.
For a championship caliber team, though, if you want to be a championship caliber team, I mean, do you have a better option? I guess is the point. If you don't have a better option, it's moot.
I mean, I think for a championship team, I don't know. For a team that's messing around and in the hunt,
he hasn't had any real minutes in the playoffs, right?
I guess not. Maybe a few for Philly at some point.
One game. I mean, aside from that, he didn't get much PT. Yeah, and that's
and that's a tough look. But who knows? He hasn't really had the opportunity to overly
all fair points
disappoint or delight, right? So I don't. It's just hard to answer those questions about him. He's not the guy you're the most excited about trusting in the playoffs, but could you envision a scenario where he comes off the bench and drops 20 in a half in a playoff game to swing a result? Sure, why not? He's that kind of guy. You're not going to lean on him. You're going to lean on Steph Curry no matter what. The only guy here to lean on dependably over and over again is Wardell, Stephen Curry, the second, third, whatever number he is. That was a poor job of giving you Stephen Curry's government name. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm trying to pull up the Boston Celtics roster last year simply to make the point that who off the top of your head would you throw out if I asked you who's the 7th guy on the Celtics roster?
Ugh. I don't even have a guess for you. Give it to me.
I mean, it kind of depends how you rate the 7th guy. But it's somebody in the group of like Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser.
I mean, I just said Pritchard.
Yeah.
That would be my
Cornette.
guess.
You know, probably not really Cornette. It's probably Hauser or Pritchard because it's the top 6 that make Boston's roster the best in the league. Now, obviously, the Warriors don't compete top 6 wise, certainly not top 5 with what the Celtics have. But if we're going to make the argument that depth beyond 6 matters at all, then yeah, Buddy Hield is better than a lot of 7th men in the league. Okay. And you know what? So is DeAnthony Melton and so is Kyle Anderson, which is to say whoever ends up the 8th or 9th or 10th in Gary Payton man or Moses Moody on this roster, those guys are going to be better than a lot of teams. And I do think that might get the Warriors more mileage than people expect in the regular season. How far does it get you in the playoffs? If they make significant progress in the playoffs by playing 10 guys, they'll be the first team to do it. But who knows? Stranger things.
Strength in numbers, man. I mean, that
That's
would complete the documentary, right?
It sure would.
Strength in numbers. The 24-25
the truest
season.
Strength
Everyone
in numbers
was doubting Curry. And with
you know
the
what?
gold medal around his neck.
That's an interesting question, Charlie, because if you had to guess, and I'll look it up right now, who would you say was probably the 7th man on the Strength in Numbers Warriors? I mean, is it Barbosa? Is it Mo Spates? Someone like that? Let's see. It would have been 14-15. What do you think? If you had to guess number 7, man, that team's even deeper. Holy Moses.
The team was so deep, man. It's hard
to that really was Strength in Numbers. Maybe that team did play 10 guys through the playoffs because David Lee's gone, essentially. So it was really 9. But still, that 7th guy is probably Sean Livingston. I mean, maybe Harrison Barnes, depending on how you want to rate it. But Livingston was definitely coming off the bench. Curry, Thompson, Green, Barnes, Iguodala, Bogut, Livingston. Could Buddy Hield have a Sean Livingston-esque late career resurgence? Probably not. But maybe DeAnthony Melton could, you know? And I do think that is the level. Like, look, you need some guys to play in the 7, 8, 9 spots on your roster like Livingston, Spates, and Barbosa did in that Strength in Numbers playoff run.
Well, you need, to your point,
but you have candidates.
You need scoring. To your point, you do need scoring because that team you just mentioned, like, you know,
those guys Clay, all scored.
Prime Clay could put the ball in the bucket, right?
Oh, but by the way, all 3 of those guys I just mentioned scored. Maurice Spates was a scoring big. He shot the ball, right? Sean Livingston was absolutely unstoppable from like 12 feet. Turnaround jumper right over your face, right? And Barbosa was the blur. I mean, he was here to score. So even on that team, which you're right, did have more scoring in the starting lineup. But look, Bogut and Draymond were both non-scorers for the most part. And Harrison Barnes was as inconsistent as Wiggins or Kaminga is. So it's not like they had, they had Clay more scoring. They had the difference between Clay and Podziemski, which is, sizable. But the other thing is the rest of the league is probably a little better. So by no means am I proposing that this will be easy. But to be in the hunt with that sort of depth, I think is a doable task.
And if the Warriors are in the hunt, then the question becomes, it's kind of the subplot behind the entire season, right? Would they look to make a move if the chips fall right and the powder, as they say, is dry and ready to go?
Well, but it's also clear that the better guys like Podziemski, if you're even willing to trade him, Kaminga, Moody, the better those sorts of guys play, it's better no matter what happens. So I
Yeah.
do wonder if those
They give him
young
the run?
guys, well, at least give them an opportunity early to earn that spot with real NBA minutes, with real opportunity early. Can you find 10 to 15 minutes a game in the first 3 weeks for Moses Moody to get a legitimate shot at starting the season as a rotation player and prove either A, I can be useful to this team this year, or B, I have the makings of a useful player somewhere else? Can you do that? Can you give Kaminga 30 plus minutes no matter what, even when he's doing a boneheaded thing? Can you let him stay out there and play through it a little bit for a month to see what the result is? Because when you let him play through more last year, the results were incredibly beneficial. As you pointed out at the beginning of the show with the lineups, right? So I do wonder, because, again, it goes against what Steve Kerr usually does, because it is always about earning it and winning tonight when you talk about who's in Steve Kerr's lineups. That's how it's been. But can he adjust to the circumstances of the organization and understand that the best way to compete for a title is either the young guys to be better than anyone thinks and be the contributors you need, or to be good enough to attract attention and net you the contributors you need in a trade? And either way, that involves giving them playing time. So I hope that's what we see.
Wise words from a wise man. October 1st, Warriors, that week away. Away. Warriors started
Let's
up.
go.
Camp in Hawaii, something to talk about. The 5th, the first preseason game against the Clippers. We'll be going live after all these things. Thanks for joining. Matt Kolsky, Charlie Walter. Happy Tuesday, or whenever you're listening to this podcast. Appreciate you. 5 stars are appreciated. Likes are appreciated. It's all free. Podcast never behind a paywall, and you can get it wherever. Peace.